Hey guys, so I wanted to give you a quick tour of my Corretto roasting setup. Corretto roasting was invented in Australia by this lady named Corretto, last name Corretto, and it involves using a heat gun and a bread machine to roast coffee. So what I've got here is I've got a bread machine that I've pulled all the electronics out of, and I've wired this motor, which is running a belt, to run continuously and agitate this blade here inside of the bread pan. Okay. Now, one of the things that's important to do is measure the temperature of your beans. I want to show you how I'm doing that. So down there, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's a small wire right there, okay, which is a thermocouple. It's a probe, and that leads to this wire, which goes to this multimeter. And I do everything in Celsius, so when I turn on this multimeter, what it's going to do is it's going to fire up, and it's now taking a reading of this probe inside of the bread pan and telling me what the temperature of the beans are during the roast. Okay, so what I do is you pour your beans down in here, and the beans are resting on top of the probe, so the probe is taking a reading off the beans. All right, so I'm taking that temperature. Also, what I've done is I've got a the temperature gauge off my Weber kettle grill, and this is sitting here on the outside giving me a temperature reading of the environment. In other words, how hot it is inside of my bread machine. So that's my environmental temperature. I just shoved 2 cans here in the top where the see-through lid was, and my heat gun, what I do is it fits in there just like that right there, okay? And I leave my heat gun on high. And the way that I control my heat, it's very important that you control your heat during the roast, because you want to turn down your heat as the roast progresses and the beans get hotter and hotter. There's different stages, and I'll show a roast later on, but there's stages and points in the roasting process where you want to turn down the heat. Now the way I do that is I run my heat gun through this regulator, which is basically a fancy dimmer switch. And you'll see it's got a setting to run it on full blast or variable. Okay, so I normally start my roast on full, and then when the beans begin to brown, I turn it to variable, and I use this knob here, okay, to turn down the heat and air coming out of my heat gun. And so generally speaking, I make 2 adjustments during the roast at certain temperatures during the roast. But just to show you how everything works, we'll turn it on real quick. And so there we go. Got the blade agitating the beans. Okay. Got my temperature reading here, and you'll see when I turn this thing on, that turns on the heat gun, and you'll start to see my temperature rise. Okay? Now, when the beans are done, go ahead and turn this off. When the beans are done, what I do is you take the bread pan out, okay, and I dump them in this wire basket here. And I put this wire colander over a tornado fan, and I can chill my beans in about a minute. And so that allows me to end the roast very quickly. So generally speaking, what I do is I roast till this meter reads, and this is in Celsius by the way, until this meter reads about anywhere between 213 and 216 Celsius, okay? And that's normally when I end my roast, and that gives me a good, nice, a dark roast without going into second crack, and it usually produces about a full city plus roast. Now, one other thing that I did here is you'll notice I've got some tin foil, and this tin foil is covering the wires of the bread machine and acting as a heat shield. Okay, there's a lot of heat that comes off of this, and I also have tin foil down in here, again acting as a heat shield between the bread pan and the body of the roaster. This motor actually gets really hot. But that's it. Basically, in a nutshell, it looks a little wild, but it works really well. And I've been producing some really fantastic roasts using this setup. But this is my Corretto roasting, otherwise known as the heat gun bread machine roasting setup. And soon I'll show you I'll show executing a roast and put that up on YouTube for you to watch, okay? All right, take care.